Albert Melone is our next speaker. He has spent a career as a professor of constitutional law, and one of the top faculty members at Southern Illinois University for many years. In his retirement, he has penned, he tells me it's a novel, although it is taken from his own family history. Mezzogiorno in Chicago, Love and Trouble on Ogden Avenue. And we really enjoyed this novel, and it had a lot of detail and a lot of truth to it. And I'm really glad to welcome to Casa Italia, Albert Melone, Professor Albert Melone.
Thank you, Dominic. I'm very pleased to be here with you today and to share this stage with so many talented people and people who are interested in advancing the cause of our identity as a culture, as an ethnic group, as an important part of American society. I'm trying to stay within my 15 minutes of Anne Weiss mandated, and I said to my wife, well, people are taking more time. Why don't I take more time? She said, no, stick to the script. So I'll do my best to stick to the script. At the turn of the 20th century, a young woman of the Abruzzo region is persuaded for economic and other reasons to leave Italy in order to marry a man she has never met. It all starts with her older brother, Dominic. He's working and living in Chicago to support the family back home, as many of our ancestors did. They worked, in the case of this family, they worked in the streets of Chicago, constructing the infrastructure of this wonderful city at the turn of the century. And like many of these birds of passage, they lived together in boarding houses, and they'd share, evenings together. And in one of those evenings, Dominic just happened to have a photo of his lovely sister available. He took it out. And someone sitting next to him, a Napolitan, who was very, very pushy, said, oh, this is a beautiful woman. Are you engaged to marry this woman? And Dominic said, no, I'm not engaged. This is my sister. But you're not interested in her. She's a bullhead. She does what she wants. Forget it. Oh, he said, oh, but she's so beautiful. I have to meet her, and so on. Well, anyway, the story goes on and on. He badgers Dominic, this Napolitan, badgers Dominic for weeks on end, until finally he propositions Dominic and says, listen, I'd like to marry your daughter, or your sister, excuse me. Can you arrange it? And well, he was in a position to do that because he happened to be the da capo of the family. His father had died several years before. So he was in that cultural position as the head of the family to try to make this arrangement. Well, he says, I'll do my best, but I can't promise you anything. Because again, she's a bullhead. She does what she wants, and she might reject you in the end. So, you're taking the chances. And by the way, if you ever come to the United States, come to America, she's going to take her mother along with her. So you're going to have to pay passage, not only for Regina, but for Angela, her mother, my mother. And that's the way it's going to have to be. Well, sure enough, on his next trip back to the old country, back to Abruzzo, he he puts the proposition to Richella. Richella ultimately says, yes, I'll do it. Basically, she had a bad relationship, or a broken relationship, not bad relationship, broken relationship. She fell in love with a leading figure in the community, the son of a leading figure. Well, and they had a kind of an interesting time together, and they were hooked up, so to speak. But he decides, I'm not going to marry you because I want to become a priest. So she's brokenhearted, and she says, "Okay, I'll go to America and I'll meet this guy and I'll marry him." Well, she shows up to Chicago after the long trip, and I tell the story in the book, the story that you're all familiar with, the boat trip. You know, the trip from Abruzzo to Rome to Naples, and the boat over, and then the train ride Ellis Island, and the train ride to Chicago, and the hazards of all of that, and so on. So Angela, the mother, Richella, and Dominic are all there together, but nowhere to be found is this Napolitan, Frankie Antonelli. He's not there. So what's going on? So they find after a few weeks that he's actually back in Napoli, taking care of his dying mother. I mean, what a wonderful young man he has to be, right? He's taking care of his dying mother. And so we're just gonna have to wait. So Richella and her mother agreed that it's the right thing to do. We're gonna wait around. But in the meantime, you know, she's a vigorous person. She's a relatively well-educated person. She had some convent education in the old country. She could read and write, and she indeed helped the old timers and the local villagers back in her community in the Brixton. So she's not just an ordinary person. She's not only beautiful, but she's intelligent. She's both. She's got this combination, and she has a heck of a lot of drive. So she says, "What do I need to do to succeed in America? What do you have to do?" "Well, you have to learn English." And someone says, "Well, the place to go is the Hull House. It's right down the street. You're living here on 12th Street, which later becomes, as you know, Roosevelt Road. You know, we'll fix you up. You can go to the Hull House." And she enters these English language and other courses there at Hull House. And there she runs into or meets a fellow student, a person from Scontrone, from the Abruzzo region. And what do you know? They fall in love. Now, this is trouble. And everybody knows this is trouble. I mean, she's promised to this man. And so this Napolitan. And so they have to figure out what to do. Well, Frankie finally arrives back in Chicago. He has an interview. He goes to the apartment where Richella and her family's living, and they meet up, and it doesn't go very well. It turns out that this guy, this Frankie, is something of a hoodoo. How did he get the money to pay for the passage of not only one woman from the old country, but two women? This guy works in the streets. You know, he's a pick and shovel guy. He can't make that kind of money. You know, it's tough anyway. It's in a few months. So obviously, and it turns out he's a hoodoo. And he carries a little pistol. He shows the family like he's bragging. You know, I got a pistol. I'm a tough guy. You know, and they say, "To hell with you." You know, we don't believe in that stuff. You know, we're good people. But we don't like the mafiosos. You know, they're scum. They're the lowlifes of the world. And so there's trouble. But in the end, Richella marries this person whose Americanized name is Pete, who's a heck of a good guy, by the way. They get married, and what happens? Well, they get married on a particular day, at Holy Family Church on what is now Roosevelt Road, as you know. And they go down and have a reception down the street on Taylor Street. And toward the end of the reception, who shows up but Frankie? And they're up on the roof letting out doves, celebrating the wedding, whatever. Frankie shows up on the roof and he pulls out his little pistol and he plugs it. He shoots her in the chest. Motto, no, everyone's, this is terrible stuff. So what does he do? They take care of him. Okay, I'll leave it up to you to read what happens to him, but they take care of him really well. Okay, he's finished. But in the meantime, they rush Riccello over to the hospital, Mother Cabrini Hospital there, and they patch her up. And then the rest of my book is a story basically of how this couple, Michelle and Pete, go through life, how they better themselves, how they have to cope themselves with violence, with death in the family, with a heck of a lot of prejudice, with extortion, with kidnapping, with police corruption, with war, with economic depression, and of course, ignorance. What else is there? Okay. They go through the whole kit and caboodle of American life. And I tell this story of how they do this, how they cope. Now, I relate these mainly real life experiences. I say mainly because it's mixed, I must say, with considerable fiction, nested within a larger framework of noteworthy local, national, and international events. I exercise my option as a fiction writer to portray my main characters in various modes of action and argument. These are disputatious encounters that center on what needs to be done in the now, in the now and then, and to evaluate the real-time critical historical events taking place in Chicago and Washington, D.C., in Italy, and in the world. And I do a lot of research on this in terms of the history, and it's rich with this history of this era. In this fashion, my characters, I think, evidence how individual life and prospects are impacted by broader worldwide or real world events. The fact is, Aristotle was right a long time ago. Life outside of the polis, outside of community, is impossible. There is no such thing as a man alone, standing alone. This is a liberal fiction of the 17th century. That we gain our identity and our meaning within the community. Now, although I think some of you might think anyway that what I have here is an entertaining story, and no doubt an entertaining story is worthy of our time, I believe that a good tale also possesses life lessons that may benefit present and future generations of Americans. Not only us Italian Americans, but the others, the others out there need to benefit from our experience. Indeed, I undertook this project because I thought it had the potential of providing readers with a better understanding of the Italian American experience, and more broadly, how Americana as a civilization might apply those lessons to contemporary life. I suggest to you that the Italian immigration and settlement experience is a valuable template for comprehending the reoccurring social and political tensions confronting Americans from the very beginnings of our republic. The often contradictory goals of individual attainment and freedom set against the competing goal of community well-being are one of the more significant problems inherent in our liberal pluralist democratic theory, otherwise known as Madisonian democracy. Individualism and materialism versus community and living for others is a consistent source of conflict in American history. It's the I versus the we society. And indeed, if you study enough American history, you'll see these waves of I-centered culture versus the we-centered culture, the selfish culture versus the altruistic culture. We undergo these waves of conflict throughout our history. At the same time, the events portrayed in my quote novel highlight what I have called, just for the sake of convenience, the maxims of survival Italian style. These are coping skills that the old timers and their immediate offspring employed as they traversed the complex social, political, economic, and cultural landscape that we commonly associate with being Americans. To whet your intellectual appetite, because I don't have enough time to explore all of these in full detail, here are a few maxims that one might deduce from a thoughtful reading of the text. First, the head of the family speaks for the whole family. You've got to have the head speaking. If you have too many speakers in the family presenting conflicting points of views or nuances, then those who you are negotiating with or dealing with on the other side will take advantage and exploit those factions within the family. So the capo principle is important. Let the head of the family speak. Related to that is don't trust outsiders. You can trust your family for sure. You can trust your paisans, that is those who you actually grew up with, not people that simply call themselves Italians, you know, like a lot of the guys in the turn of the century did. In the old neighborhood, oh yeah, I'm a paisan, and I'm from Italy. No, you don't trust those guys, they'll take advantage of you. You trust those, you trust those who are closest to you and that you've had great experience. There are rules of negotiation, of negotiating with others that come out in a variety of forms in this book that you will find. I think Dominic in our espresso meeting some months ago said, well, this could be taught in the business schools. Well, maybe, yeah, I don't know. But certainly these are rules that are important to understand. And the Italians, as many of you know, were very good at this, at negotiation. There's the importance of honoring marital engagements. Don't interfere with engagements. Why? Because it causes jealousy. It causes hatred. It can set off, you know, a series of unfortunate events, which I describe in the text, in the book here. There's the problem that not only Italians, but a lot of Europeans have, in particular, in my experience, anyway, studying not only Italy, but studying Eastern Europe. There's this order of revenge and vendetta. How do you get around this? And Italians have worked this out, so to speak, not completely, but you know, there's this principle of restitution that Italians are, hey, help invent for Western culture. You make up, you know, in the law of torts, this is called the principle of restitution. You make people whole again for the harm that you created. And of course, in American society, the way we do that is to give them money. Well, in the old country, they did some of that too. But the point is, you've got to figure this out. Courage, coraggio, is an admirable trait. And indeed, Pete, the husband of Rachel, is a paragon of courage. He stood up to the mafia bums, hoodlums that bombed his hardware store, not only once, but twice. And it gained him great respect in the community on Ogden Avenue. And ultimately, those bums went away. And maybe with the help of Al Capone, by the way, because Al Capone was a customer of Rachella, who opened up a butcher shop, by the way, on Ogden Avenue. And indeed, there's a lot of truth in that particular story. At least that's the story that's been passed down in my family. Pursuing one's self-interest is a proper perspective. It's okay to be self-interest, but it has to be put in proper perspective. It must be done in the interest not of the self, but of the family. It's what, and indeed, this comes in a variety of flavors. You'll find it in a secular form. Alexis de Tocqueville, in his famous Democracy in America, published, when was it, 1848 or so, devotes a whole chapter of that book to this idea that we look out for our fellow human beings, because in the end, it's good for ourselves. You know, a high tide raises all the boats in society. Or you take the religious point of view, which Rachella is a good exponent of this view in my book. She's really a good Catholic, and so she's quoting, Mark and others in terms of first loving God, and then of course loving others as we love ourselves. Appealing to God's natural laws is central to creating a just society. And you find this, I explore this in Pope Leo the 13th, 1891 papal encyclical Rerum Novarum, which is on the conditions of labor. And he comes out for the right of laborers to organize, which was a very important document for Catholics around the world. It was an important concession to the rights of labor. But it's based on natural law principles. And those of you who've had these good Catholic educations know that St. Thomas used natural law and reason to create human law. Lastly, I don't take up too much time. Life is, as Maria pointed out, life is not simply a matter of black and white, is it? There's considerable gray in the world, and the Italian Americans who came to this country understood this, and that's why a lot of the Italian Americans had problems with the American church, American Catholic Church, that were run by the Irish here in Chicago and elsewhere. They had very strict point of view. They looked down on the Italians. What the heck, you got to obey the law, the rules very strictly. And the Italians said, come on, come on. We can't go too far with this thing. Religion's important, but you got to put things in perspective. And that also goes with obeying the law. We obey the law, but you don't obey it to the letter, to the point that it may, in fact, endanger you. So, let me leave you with this last thought. We don't have to accept all the old world ideas. God forbid, right? But we need to pay close attention to the concept of community. The love that flows from family life and others with whom we share similar values is a helpful shield, I think, from the alienation and loneliness and enemy and distress of contemporary life that we experience in this otherwise mass society. And the Italians know how to get around this. They know that clinging to family values is a way of coping. And indeed, the identity that we have as Italians can be a lesson to the rest of American society in creating a better place to live. Thank you very much.